Hey guys, we are back updating the power rankings for Australian Survivor Heroes vs. Villains following week 4 and what I believe to be the last full week before the merge. And this is obviously going to be another pretty chaotic ranking as it has been the last couple weeks of the season, but that's just how it is. But there are 15 players to rank, and let's not waste any more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 15, we have the first boot from this week, and here we have Jordy. And despite me trying so hard to be careful, I just wasn't careful enough. And sure enough, Jordy ended up going home here. Now, I will acknowledge that coming into the week, he wasn't in the best position from a game standpoint, but I was under the impression based on his edit that he would be able to survive that. Now, granted, he had an opportunity to do so when Shawnee gave him her idol, and he did use that as a way of flipping over Haley and Nina. However, they were not able to keep Simon on their side. Jordy got a bit too risky by not playing his idol, which obviously caused a tie, and obviously he wasn't going to survive that. But it's still pretty funny how my number one pick over these last couple of weeks have all had massive drop-offs here. Obviously, Shawnee went home the very week after I put her number one, and Simon had a pretty massive drop-off after I put him at number one in week 1, and now Jordy is continuing this trend, and I'll admit, it's kind of funny in my personal opinion, but it's also pretty clear that this season of Australian Survivor is being edited a bit differently than the last couple of seasons. Now, whether it'll be an entirely new form, or maybe they're gonna go back to what they did in 2016, back in the earlier seasons, we'll have to see what happens here, but clearly, I was fooled. Jordy went home, and because of that, he is here at number 15. Now, moving on to number 14, we have the other boot from this week, but here we have Benjamin. And Benjamin was actually someone I was kind of high on in the preseason, although once the season actually started, he quickly fell off. Now, from a game standpoint, he didn't play the best game in the world, where he was never really able to find himself in the majority group, where he was seen as this sort of outsider and someone that wasn't super trustworthy, and someone that was a bit expendable in the game. He obviously needed an idol during the Shawnee tribal, and while you can sort of credit him for pinning the votes onto Shawnee, I don't think that was necessarily the best move for him. And I feel like moving forward, he is someone who, despite playing at the bottom, it seemed like his strategy was to play it more slowly, where he was trying to more so appease to the majority alliance rather than try to really gather the outsiders, which I can give or take. I mean, on one hand, like, he is trying to lower his own threat level and in turn fly under the radar until the merge. However, I also feel like he did it in a way that didn't really garner him much favor in the game, to where by the time of the swab, like, there was really no one that was actively willing to save him. Now, granted, he does go home in a 4-3 vote. However, even then, like, he wasn't presented in an overly positive light, where he was trying to, again, placate to the majority heroes that never really had much allegiance to him. And really the reason he goes home is because he was the least likely person to have an idol played on him, which sure enough was accurate, where the idol was played on Matt over him. So at the end of the day, I feel like Benjamin played a pretty mediocre game, and while I can understand why he did some of the things that he did, I feel like it was largely ineffective. And because of that, he is here number 14. And with that, there are 13 players left in the game to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how lucky I think they are to win, based on their edit and current game position. But at number 13, we have the player who has been at the bottom of most of these rankings, but here we have David. And believe it or not, David actually got a confessional in episode 12. I know, it took him long enough. Now, to be fair, from a pure game standpoint, I feel like David's actually playing pretty well, where he has been in the majority for most of the game, and even in his latest batch of episodes, he was shown branching out by forming this alliance with Nina, Sam, and Liz, to where he now has more options moving forward on top of the Alpha Males alliance. So I feel like objectively, he's playing a pretty good game right now, and I feel like when it comes time to do the player ranking after the season, I'll have plenty of good things to say about him. But if we are assessing him based on his likelihood of winning, he's not winning the game. I mean, he is never on the show. The show is almost going out of its way to not give him any content. So because of that, he is here at number 13. Now moving on to number 12, and this was a bit of a weird placement considering that this person technically got more content this week. However, as it is, I feel like this was not that great of a week for them. But here we have Nina. And Nina did get a spike in content. She got plenty of content during the first episode where she was flipped over to the Jordy and Liz side before Jordy didn't play his idol. And then afterwards, she did get an intro package talking about her relationship with Sandra that then led into her building this new alliance that could have made things interesting had they gone to another tribal. However, all that is undone after Liz, someone that they worked very hard to pull over, is mutinied over to the Heroes tribe, and it felt like all that was being set up for nothing. And I feel like at this point, Nina's in a pretty bad spot. And really before that, I feel like Nina hasn't exactly been presented in an overly positive light, where it does seem like she's making suboptimal moves. Like you have the Shawnee round, for example, where she did get the content of sharing the fact that Shawnee was left out of the split vote plan, which you think would have led to her potentially flipping the vote against one of the guys. But then no, she ultimately is part of the group that votes out Shawnee instead. So I felt like that was a missed opportunity there. Moving forward, I mean, you have the Jordy round where I understand why she flips against Jordy after Jordy doesn't play his idol. There's a tied vote. And really, her hands were tied, but still, that's not a great look there. And even in the most recent episode, when she still had this alliance, she was trying to flip the vote and blindside Haley, someone who has never been shown to be hostile towards Nina. In fact, it actually seemed like they were working together for a lot of the pre-merge. And it's not even that great of a move for Nina, as I feel like it would have been better for her to cut Simon in that round. But I feel like by cutting Haley, she's just cutting out someone that would have been willing to work with her moving forward, while not really weakening the majority alliance. And obviously with this new alliance, like, it doesn't really amount to anything, and I can't really see how it really gains the numbers in the future. Now, I think another thing that you can knock against Nina is that if we are assessing the trends that we are seeing on this season, it does seem like Nina could be set up to be a boot in the next couple of rounds, as it seems like a trend this season has been for the eventual boot to get a spike in content in the couple of episodes before their eventual boot. We saw it with Rogue, where she got spikes in content in the episodes leading up to her boot. We saw it with Shawnee, even in the episodes of which Jerry was over on the other side. We saw it with Paige in the Shawnee boot before she is eventually taken out. We saw with Jordy in, obviously, the initial swap episode that I thought was actually good content for him. And we have seen it in spades with Benjamin as well. So we have seen this trend where it's not just the boot episode in which the person voted out gets a spike in content. It's also like in the episode or two before that. And I feel like with Nina getting this content and getting all this credit for building this alliance, only for it to amount to nothing over the last episode or two, I feel like it's just setting up Nina to be taken out right before the merge, which coupled with her relative lack in content before then, and a relative lack of positive content before then, and the fact that she even got her intro package before this storyline that went nowhere, I feel like there's a lot of red flags that will point to Nina being a boot in the next couple of rounds, which leads her here at number 12. Now moving on to number 11, and we have someone who I've consistently had back-to-back with Nina, but I had them above them, but here we have Flick. And Flick is continuing to be a bit under the radar, a bit more than I would like. And she did get kind of embarrassed during episode 11, where George obviously tested her to throw the idol into the fire. She refuses, but then when she goes to play the idol, she is shocked to learn that it's fake, which is a pretty funny moment there, but not necessarily one that props up Flick. And obviously she's in a pretty bad spot on her tribe right now. I feel like if they go back to tribal, she'll be in a lot of danger there. However, I feel like compared to Nina, I feel like Flick hasn't been undermined as much in the edit to where I could see her making a deeper run. However, it's her bad short-term position as well as her not really having much content to back her up that leads her here at number 11. Now we're moving on to number 10, and I'm actually surprised that I moved this person up compared to where they were before, but here we have Simon. Now, for the most part, his content was pretty bad, where early on, he is, again, like, kind of being desperate in trying to placate these heroes by obviously being talked into giving away his idol. Now, granted, he does give it the Flick, but even so, like, it's not a great look there. And especially once the idol is proven to be fake and all the heroes get mad at him into where they're now targeting him as they feel like they tricked them by giving him a fake idol because they think that he knew it was fake. And all the while, he's just shocked to learn that the idol was never real to begin with. However, despite this bad content and despite his bad position, the reason I didn't move him up is I feel like now that the idol's out of play, I feel like that kind of sets up Simon more for a deeper run. Where I felt like before then, I felt like it would have culminated with him trying to idol out George, obviously with him holding onto the idol until his eventual boot round, but then obviously he learns the idol's not fake and is promptly voted out there. So I feel like by him getting rid of the idol now, but still being in the game, does kind of prop him up. And we did get some content of him feeling bad over just how he tricked everyone or unintentionally tricked everyone. And now he's in a bad spot there, which could make him set up for a deeper run. But realistically, he's still not winning the game. He's still getting a mostly negative edit. And because of that, he is here at number 10. Now we're moving on to number 9. And this person did drop a couple spots from where I had them before. But here we have Haley. And it's not so much because she was being targeted during this latest round that made me drop her. It's just that I feel like as more time passes, I feel like I just don't have much justification for Haley being as high on the list as she is. Whereas I feel like beforehand, I just kind of assumed that she was sort of being presented positively in the edit and that she was somehow playing under the radar, even with all these concerns that she's just being kept around as a shield. However, now at this point, like, she isn't getting much content on the show, and while it seems on paper that she has remained in the majority throughout a lot of the game, when you really think about it, she's not really in the core group, as obviously when Sean was breaking down the majority alliance to Simon, he did not include Haley in that discussion, which does make me think that despite her work and despite her being the majority, that she hasn't really built any inroads here to the point where she is still largely seen as that shield that will eventually be cut out just to allow the other members to advance in the game. And I think it's also pretty bad that despite Nina building this new counter alliance, that she doesn't include Haley in that, and that she even tried to blindside Haley at this latest tribal in order to put a move on her resume or whatever. So I feel like Haley at this point is probably not winning this game. Now, I still think there's a chance she can make the merge and could work with George moving forward, but I feel like she just hasn't done really much to give me much confidence in her moving forward. She's in a pretty bad spot gameplay-wise, and I feel like the edit just hasn't really checked in on her all that much. So because of that, she is here at number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and we have someone who I moved up slightly compared to last week, but not to any ridiculous degree. But here we have Matt. And Matt did get a bit more content this week. Now, obviously, he's in a pretty bad spot where he was saved largely due to him having an idol played on him, only for the idol to be fake and for them to lose a number on their side anyway. But then moving forward, we see Matt obviously attempt to build some inroads with George and the new majority group. And he is shown to be considering it, although it's never really followed up on. And I could give or take with this content, where I feel like it's sort of similar to what I said earlier about Nina, where it's possible that this could just simply set him up as the next boot, especially with Flick being someone that may or may not be willing to work with George in the future. We'll have to see what happens there. But it's the fact that he did get a bit more content and the fact that we are seeing a bit more of his game, that plus the premiere, which again is something that I continue to use to hold him in somewhat high contention. But at the end of the day, he's not a super high contender for me. So because of that, he is here at number 8. Now moving on to number 7, and we have another player that I don't think is winning, but they could be a major character in the future. But here we have Sam, and I think there's a case to be made for Sam. Now, obviously, he does get a lot of credit for the creation of the new alliance that doesn't amount to anything. And even before that, he was obviously the backup target during the Jordy tribal, where had Jordy played his idol, he would have gone home there. That's not particularly great. And even at this latest tribal, he was sort of a secondary target where the plan was for Haley to put one vote onto him in case both Liz and Simon had idols, which isn't great and doesn't bode well for his overall position. However, unlike Nina, I feel like Sam has gotten a more consistent presence throughout the season, and I think he is being more set up for a deeper storyline. I think the key storyline with him is sort of his rivalry with Sean, where Sean was shown early on to be not trusting of Sam. He feels like he's not a very reliable ally, and in general, I feel like Sam is being set up as sort of a catalyst that could eventually lead to Sean's downfall, which obviously we'll be talking about more with Sean later on. However, I feel like Sam at least is being set up for a deeper run than Nina, despite him getting all this content that didn't really amount to much, and plus, he does have more of a case to be the narrator of the season. So I feel like there's more going on with Sam's edit that makes me think he'll be in the game for longer than a lot of the other people we already talked about. However, at the end of the day, I just feel like there's not enough for him to actually win the game. So because of that, he is here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and this person did slide again compared to where they were last week, but here we have Jerry, and Jerry was pretty invisible this week. He didn't really get any content, and while he himself wasn't really relevant to it, and he does seem to be in a pretty good position moving forward, I also feel like at this point, I just don't feel that high about Jerry anymore. I feel like he is someone who definitely has a lot of potential to be a losing finalist, or at the very least, someone who's like cut right before the end, sort of like a Kara from Brains versus Brawn. However, I feel like with Jerry, while he is not as bad of a player compared to Kara, I feel like he is someone that just hasn't been propped up nearly as much as he probably should have. And at this point, I just don't feel like he's going to win the game. However, I think with his current game position that he's probably going to make a very deep run. But as it is, I can't really have him any higher than number 6 at this point. Now moving on to number 5, and we have a player that did shoot up a bit. However, I do wonder how much of that is circumstantial. But here we have Liz. And Liz definitely got a spike in content this week, where she obviously was shown beyond the outs early on, with her trying and failing to make a move with Jordy, and then after it all blows up, she is still able to be pulled into this alliance. Now, granted, I did kind of knock her that she didn't get more content in the creation of the alliance, as I felt like Nina and Sam were getting more content. But even then, she does get content in the next episode where she talks about being in a better position, which is bolstered when she is mutinied over to the Heroes Tribe, where she is with the core of the Spice Girls Alliance. And I feel like that doesn't really contradict her statement, where despite her not getting as much content in the creation of the new Villains Alliance, she is still being set up to have a stronger position at this point. And I think the other reason why I did bump her up is I feel like now that Jordy is out of the game, I am pretty convinced that the winner of the game will be a Spice Girl, or at least someone within that alliance. Now, whether it's Liz specifically, we'll have to wait and see. However, I feel like there's still some potential there. Now, I will acknowledge that the main knock to her content is the fact that it did feel circumstantial, that the main reason that she does get this content is because she was on the outs, and then later on she is, again, mutinied over to the other side, and they had to explain why that happened. But I still feel like there's at least somewhat of a chance for Liz, more so than I thought before, which is why I do have her here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and we have another member of the Spice Girls Alliance, but here we have Stevie. And at the end of the day, Stevie might be a bit too high on this list. However, with my assumption that the winner of the game will be within this alliance, that does bolster Stevie to a degree, and he does get a bit of content as well, where he is kind of a swing vote during this tribal. Now granted, it didn't feel very effective, where despite the heroes trying to use his old symbol from when he was meditating and stuff, it didn't feel that authentic. I didn't feel that convinced that Stevie was actually going to flip, especially with him seeming to have more loyalty with the Georges and Shawnees of the world. Although granted, there is still the potential for him to eventually flip against Shawnee in the future. That could still be a sore spot for him. However, he still gets bolstered by him doubling the amount of time he was in the game the first time. And I think there is some stuff that you can point to with Stevie. Now, realistically, I feel like he's sort of similar to Jerry in that he has a lot of potential to just be dragged to the end, not really have much of a chance to win at the end. However, I feel like compared to Liz, I feel like his content wasn't as necessary. So because of that, he is here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and while my overall opinion of this person has dropped, I did actually bump them up compared to what I had them before. But here we have Sean. And I still stand by a lot of what I think about Sean, and in fact, I think this week continues to add fuel to the fire that he's being set up for a downfall down the road. However, I feel like now that Jordy is out of the game, I think there is more potential for Sean than I gave him credit for. I feel like out of the people outside these Spice Girls, I feel like he easily has the best chance of winning among the people outside that alliance. It's just that I feel like the Spice Girls are very likely to actually win the game. I am very convinced that these Spice Girls are meant to be the main characters of the season. That sort of leaves Sean to be more of the antagonist at the end of the day. Now I know that there are other people that don't quite see it that way. They think that Sean still has potential and that he is ultimately the front runner. However, I feel like there's just more of a case that Sean will be taken down the road. Like you have people like a Simon who feels like that he's no longer on the ends with them. You have the Spice Girls themselves who are largely turning against the alpha male alliance that Sean has consolidated. And even this past week, we saw Sam continue to get more of this through line of building a counter response to that as well. So I feel like Sean is someone who, despite seeming like a frontrunner on paper, does seem to be more of a major force that will eventually be taken out. I feel like that hasn't really changed. It's just through other people being taken out, namely a Jordy, that has sort of consolidated a lot of the non-Spice Girls win equity into Sean more than anything else. But at the end of the day, I still feel like a Spice Girl's actually going to win the game, which leaves him here at number 3. Alright, now we're moving on to number 2, and this is where I had to be even more careful now, as I realized that by picking who's going to be at number 2, I'm in turn picking who's going to be at number 1. And I just had to be more careful now. I can't just pick someone that's going to go home the very next week. However, with all that said, there are obviously 2 people left, 2 Spice Girls, and I'm going to take another leap here and base it more off the edit than on gameplay. But at number 2, I did decide to go with Shawnee. Now, realistically, I think Shawnee probably has a bit more win equity if we're basing it purely off the game, as I feel like she has largely avoided the target that George has throughout a lot of the game, while still maintaining a lot of these great relationships, and I feel like that's something that can really benefit her in the future. However, I also feel like she hasn't really gotten much in the edit, to where I feel like I can't really justify putting her above the number 1 person. Now, granted, I still feel like going to the merge, he probably will be in a solid position to actually do well. However, it's with her lack of content this week, and even with her handing the idol off to Jordy, which did not pan out, and even contradicted what she said about giving the idol to Liz, that does make me a bit worried for Shawnee from an edit standpoint. But even so, I still feel like a Spice Girl is going to win the game. I feel like Shawnee probably has one of the better cases compared to these other players that I feel like either have a lot of potential to be losing finalists, or at least in Liz's case, hasn't really gotten the content yet to demonstrate that she is a strong contender for me, which leaves Shawnee as this person that still has gotten a relatively strong edit, but still has a path forward in the game, not only from a narrative standpoint of the Spice Girls getting all the way down together, but also for her to actually avoid the target that certain other people have in order to actually win the game. But at the end of the day, it's the fact that her edit has been a bit more subdued than I would like that leaves her here at number 2. Now number 1, the player I believe is the most likely to win right now, or at the very least is the most likely to flame out in the next week and be voted out, is George. Now, I know what I said earlier, that I should probably be a bit more careful here and not pick someone that is like more likely to flame out in the next week. And I think George, moving forward, does have some danger spots from a gameplay standpoint. Like, I think you can make the argument that he is largely being kept around as a shield, and even moving forward, you have people that think he's just too out in front and that they need to stop him before it's too late and what have you. But on the other hand, I feel like George is always such an anomaly where he is always going to be this out in front character, but is also someone who is a really effective player and is someone that I continue to underestimate every time that I watch him. I mean, even during Brazen versus Braun, like there are multiple times during that season where I was just awestruck at how he was able to elude his target on his back. And even this season, like there is a debate that he could just be kept around as a shield. But then again, it does seem like he has a genuine backing behind him at this point, even with all the stuff that he's doing and the fact that he hasn't really been playing that under the radar. Like, I don't know. And plus, the main thing I'll give him over Shawnee is that I feel like he is being set up more as a main character for this season than Shawnee, to where I could very easily see this being a repeat of Brains versus Braun. Now, admittedly, there is still more potential for him to be a boot in the next couple rounds compared to Shawnee, and if that were to happen, then I would not put it past anyone to claim that I cursed him. But you know what? Considering the track record that I've already had for this season, I might as well just go off my gut feeling here. For despite Shawnee and certain other people seeming like better prospects on paper, I feel like there's a lot I can say about George to defy the odds and to make it through. And if I'm wrong, then it would not be that out of character for me. But as it stands, I feel like I have more to say about George's edit being propped up than anyone else, which is why I have him here at number 1. And there we go, that will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, it really helps out with the channel. Now obviously I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings again, so stay tuned for that. We are now less than 1 week away from Survivor 44 starting, so I'll be doing content for that as well. And we also have Big Brother Canada starting up relatively soon as well, so you can stay tuned for that. And if you haven't already, be sure to join my Discord server, where we're actually hosting a draft game for Survivor 44, and there's still time to enter, so be sure to do that. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that's the video. See ya.